someone's singing karaoke. So if you hear their voice in the background, I am totally sorry. Truth be told, January 2024 didn't exactly bring the best books on my shelves. I felt like Yellowface fell short of my expectations, and That Valley and the Namiya General Store, although they were generally good, they were just a little bit so-so. Now, I'm saying that because when this type of thing happens to me, when you're like reading one underwhelming book after another, I tend to fall into a reading slump. But thank the book gods. Everything all changed when I decided to pick up The Racial Incident by Caroline O Donaghue. Now, I've had this book on my radar for like the longest time. I was initially attracted by the cover, and I'm so glad I did. This is just one of those situations where you absolutely can judge a book by its cover. And I fell deeper in love when I realized that it was actually set in Ireland. As a longtime Derry Girls fan, Cillian Murphy fan, and a staunch supporter of Marianne and Connell, there was no question I was gonna read The Racial Incident. And to be completely honest, I am absolutely glad I did. Because not only did this book really fortify what my book preferences are, it also taught me a lot about love. Now, despite not being Irish myself, obviously, I found that I had a lot in common with Rachel. We both spent a chunk of our younger years amid an ongoing recession. And like Rachel, I also made a number of bad decisions in my life. And like Rachel, I have spent a lot of nights getting pissed off drunk in a seedy bar or pub, as the English might call it. In other words, I too was a college kid trying to figure out life, trying to make friends, and trying to make relationships that actually last. And I think that's what you should really know about The Racial Incident. It's a coming of age story about a girl that's legally an adult, but as I said, is still trying to figure out life. Now, speaking of life, one major character in Rachel's life is her friend James, who she initially meets while working at a bookstore. James happens to be a working class person, and although insistently straight at first, he does eventually come out, and Rachel and him decide to move in together. Basically like Will and Grace, except for Irish people. Now, something involving Rachel's crush, a professor in her college named Dr. Byrne, alters the course of both Rachel and James's life. It all starts when the two hatch a plan to seduce the very married, by the way, Dr. Byrne in the bookshop they both work in. Now, things do not go as planned, and it's this very incident that changes their lives forever. And that's not even like an exaggeration. What happens in the bookstore triggers a series of events that eventually lead to our book title, The Racial Incident. Now, I'm not going to spoil what happens because it was so scandalous, and I want you guys to read it for yourself. I literally gasped when I read it unfold. I'm also not going to talk about what events happened after, because a lot of what happens in this book is really tied to that incident. Now, I'm gonna give a very, very mild spoiler, so pause this video if you do not want to know this tiny detail. But the book is actually told by the perspective of an older Rachel, who looks fondly at her university years and young adulthood. So we kind of get the gist that Rachel is doing fine eventually. We just want to know what led to her being so settled and so happy in the future. Now, this might not be a spoiler, but of course her friendship with James is at the center of it all. Their time together during her university years and them moving together is just as messy, chaotic, and just so beautiful and young. I felt like I was reading a page from someone else's life. It almost felt intrusive even. Amid, of course, that relationship with James is just Rachel. She's a young girl trying to figure out her life. She's in her 20s. She's figuring out how to pay next month's rent, how her part-time jobs are just going straight to bleary nights at the pub, and how much her situationship with this guy, also named James, is going to work out. And I really like the way that Rachel explored all these growing pains, because she just took it like any real person would. There was a lot of fear, there was a lot of mistakes, vulnerability, and everything that you could just imagine when you're in that situation. And I really like that her character would get hung over heartbreak and lost chances or how much she thought about guys that would just ghost you when you're just about to fall in love. But all these things, they never really did tie her down. For Rachel, like most of us, life would just go on after a major heartbreak or another. You just have to accept that life doesn't really turn out the way you want it to. There are times that people don't love you back, whether it's friends or a significant other, and then you would just have to forgive yourself, forgive others, and when you can't do that, you just have to forget and move on. Now, as much as I did like the character of Rachel, she wasn't a saint either. She said some bad things and made some morally questionable decisions, but you're drawn to her story because despite her flaws, she's just human like the rest of us. I mean, she does extort a married couple in the book, but I'm totally behind her with that. Now, the characters of this book were also so imperfectly perfect too. And yes, I might have developed a crush on Class 2 Irish guy Carrie. But for all it's worth, we have all been guilty of pining over a guy that didn't have his life together, was only interested in a situationship, had a lot of growing up to do, but hey, he was cute and slightly older, so Raish, I get it. And of course, there's James. Gosh, there's James. I truly believe that each one of us has had a James in our life. Not just by the name, but somebody who is totally messy, totally loves the drama, but you just can't seem to let them go because they're such good friends. As I was reading this story, I was thinking of the Jameses of my life. Jameses. It just felt so weirdly good to see a version of my friends in paper because it made me realize how lucky I am to have a James or two in my life. Now, let's talk a bit about the trigger warning in this book. I think I just want to put it out there that this story does speak heavily about abortion. Now, I have always known about Ireland's 8th Amendment and how citizens of the country fought so hard to repeal the law against abortion. Today, the country has eased policies against abortion, although I have read bits and pieces online that access to quality care is still difficult in parts of the country. Now, personally, I think I stated this before. I think that was in my review of The Dressmaker of Paris. I am someone that is totally pro-choice. And it's very frustrating to live in a country that's still stuck in its old ways. To sum up my feelings, I strongly believe that women should have access to safe abortion, no matter the circumstance. Now, I don't think she explicitly says this in any of her interviews, but based on Rachel's story, I truly believe that Caroline O Donaghue feels the same way. She incorporates this very important conversation into Rachel's story. And it's another definitive moment for Rachel and James because they lean into each other throughout this very difficult time. And overall, I think if you're somebody who shares the same beliefs as I do, I think that you'll be happy to hear that abortion is recognized as a difficult decision to make, but also something that all women have the right to make. And I think that it's so tastefully done. Now, characters and trigger warnings aside, I do think that the writing and pacing of this book was done very, very well too. I know it's tricky when you're trying to incorporate so many years of experiences of a person's life in a book without it being overwritten, but I think that the author did it so flawlessly. You don't really feel like that the book is dragging on at all, and you don't feel like the book is having this crazy time jumps. Overall, I really thought that it was such a great book. I found myself really invested in Rachel's life because it really mirrored a lot of what I experienced in mine. I saw on one of the reviews, I think this was from Gabrielle Zevin, the writer of Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow. She did say that if ever you've been young, you would totally love this book. And I think that's a very perfect way to encapsulate how I felt reading The Rachel Incident. It's Millenial-core at its finest. I know that's very cringy to say, but this is really a book that's centered on millennials. So if you're a 30-something or late 20s woman, you would totally love this book. I mean, there are really still days that I beat myself up for mistakes that I made growing up. But I think that this book really helps you forgive your 20-year-old self. I don't care how dramatic that sounds. After reading the last page of this book, I wanted to go back in time so bad and tell myself that I was young, I was trying to figure out life, I was going through a recession, and I had ridiculously low pay. But most importantly, I tried, and I'm here today because of it. I mean, while we're in the vein of being so sentimental, no one is ever going to be good at growing up. I'm 30 plus now and I'm still awful at it. I don't have a car, I don't have a house under my name, but that's okay because I still have a lot of growing up to do. And I didn't want the racial incident to end. I was honestly a bit surprised over the ending because I found it to be super abrupt, but nonetheless, I felt like there was not much story to tell anymore anyway. And in my head, all the character storylines sort of wrapped up very nicely, and that's really all that matters. I can't ask for anything more from this book. So yes, I am giving this a glowing 5-star read. It feels so good to give a 5-star rating to a book because I felt like I haven't read a good book in a long time, or at least a book that really matched my preferences. I love this book and I 100% recommend this to anyone who feels stuck, who feels heartbroken, who's going through college, through work, who is in love, who has great friends, who is looking for a good book to read. This book is for all of us. So here we are at the end of the video. Thank you for listening to me ramble for the past, I guess this is gonna be a 5 to 10 minute video, and I hope you really did like it. Now please consider picking this book up whether you want to read an ebook. I read an ebook and I kind of regret it because I really want a physical copy now, but either way, this story, the racial incident, is totally worth your time. So once again, I am Losing Sun. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a like if you like this video. And I'll see you on my next one. Bye!